13 rifles had spoken across 3 days, and 13 rifles had failed. The 4,000-meter target stood untouched in the Nevada desert, mocking every elite sniper the United States Navy had ever produced. But in the back of the observation room, far from the frustrated competitors and the clicking analysts, a woman sat alone with hands that never moved and eyes that calculated trajectories no one had asked her solve. Chief Petty Officer Kira Okonkwo had not spoken a single unnecessary word in 11 months. The other SEALs had theories about her silence. Some thought she was broken from too many deployments. Others figured she simply had nothing to say. None of them suspected that her quiet was not emptiness. It was discipline, the kind of discipline that came from carrying a weight no one else could see. Before we continue with this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you know someone in the military who was underestimated before proving everyone wrong. The competition had been Admiral Cross's idea. SOCOM needed to know if the theoretical 4,000-meter shot was achievable for next-generation operations. They had gathered the 13 finest marksmen from across the special operations community. Every one of them decorated, every one of them confident, every one of them male. Master Chief Vincent Harlow had made the selections personally, and when Lieutenant Commander Ezra Vance had questioned why Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo was absent from the roster, Harlow had dismissed the inquiry with 3 words: support personnel only. Kira had heard the exchange from her position near the equipment table. She had not reacted. She never reacted. She simply continued inventorying ammunition while the chosen 13 prepared for their attempts at immortality. The first shooter had missed by 32 feet, the second by 27. By the time the 5th competitor had failed, the observers had begun checking their watches. The shot was impossible. Everyone knew it now. Everyone except the woman in the back who had filled 9 pages of a small notebook with calculations that no one had requested. Petty Officer Second Class Marcus Chun approached the equipment table near the end of the first day. His hands trembled slightly as he inspected his rifle for the 3rd time. He was the youngest competitor, selected more for potential than proven excellence, and the pressure was cracking his composure. Kira watched him struggle with a scope calibration that should have taken 30 seconds. After 2 full minutes of his fumbling, she set down her inventory clipboard and moved to his side. She did not ask permission. She did not offer words of comfort. She simply placed her hands on the rifle and made 3 adjustments so precise that Chun would later swear he heard the weapon sigh with relief. He stared at her. How did you know it was off? The reticle was pulling .003 left, barely visible, but enough to matter at distance. Chun blinked. Nobody else caught that, not even the armorers. Kira returned to her clipboard without responding. Chun hesitated, wanting to say more, but something in her stillness told him the conversation was over. He took his rifle and walked toward the firing line, glancing back twice at the woman who had just given him freely what the official technical team had missed entirely. Lieutenant Commander Vance observed this exchange from across the room. He had been watching Okonkwo since his question to Harlow had been deflected. There was something about her economy of movement that reminded him of the most dangerous operators he had ever served alongside. Every gesture purposeful, every moment of stillness intentional. She moved like someone who had learned that wasted motion could mean death. When the day ended and the competitors filed out to nurse their failures, Vance noticed that Okonkwo had left her notebook on the equipment table. He crossed the room and opened it, expecting routine inventory notes. What he found instead made him reach for the nearest chair. The pages were filled with ballistic calculations that exceeded anything the competition's official analytics team had produced. Wind drift projections, Coriolis effect compensations, temperature gradient adjustments. Each formula was precise, elegant, and entirely correct. He recognized the mathematics from his years working with SEAL sniper programs, but these calculations pushed beyond established doctrine into territory he had never seen mapped. Vance looked up from the notebook toward the doorway where Kira had disappeared. The observation room was empty now, silent except for the hum of cooling electronics. He turned back to her calculations and began photographing each page with his phone. By the time he finished, The sun had set over the Nevada proving grounds, and Lieutenant Commander Vance had a single question burning in his mind. Who exactly was Chief Petty Officer Kira Okonkwo, and what else was she capable of that Master Chief Harlow had decided the Navy did not need to see? The Nevada sun rose angry and red over the proving grounds, painting the desert in shades of dried blood. Day 2 of the competition began with 3 more failures before noon. The first shooter had come within 18 feet of the target, the closest anyone had managed, and his celebration lasted until the official measurement confirmed what everyone already knew. Close was not good enough. Close was just another word for failure. Kira arrived at the observation room before dawn, claiming her usual position near the equipment table. She had retrieved her notebook without comment, though she noticed several pages had been handled since she left it. The oils from unfamiliar fingers left traces she could read as easily as text. Someone had been curious. She did not alter her routine in response. Routine was armor. Routine was safety. Routine kept the memories at bay. Master Chief Harlow conducted the morning briefing with his characteristic blend of technical precision and barely concealed contempt for anyone who questioned his methods. When Kira offered a suggestion about adjusting the wind calculation protocols based on thermal patterns she had observed, Harlow cut her off mid-sentence. Support personnel are here to support, not to theorize. If I wanted input from someone who has never made this shot, I would ask the cafeteria staff. Several competitors laughed. Marcus Chen did not. He watched Kira absorb the insult without visible reaction, her face as still as pond water on a windless day. But Chen had seen her hands on his rifle the day before. He had watched her identify a flaw in 30 seconds that trained armorers had missed entirely. Whatever Master Chief Harlow believed about her, Chen was beginning to suspect the truth was considerably more complicated. Senior Chief Darnell Webb observed the exchange from the far corner of the room. His expression revealed nothing, but his eyes tracked Kira with the recognition of someone who knew exactly what he was looking at. Webb had served 23 years in the SEAL teams. He had trained snipers who became legends. He had also been present for operations that existed in no official record, missions so classified that even acknowledging their existence could end a career. Kira Okonkwo had been part of one such mission. What she had done during those 47 minutes in Kandahar province would never appear in any commendation or service record. But Webb remembered. He would remember until the day he died. The afternoon brought 2 more attempts. Both failed. The competition's morale had begun to fracture, competitors turning their frustration inward or toward each other. Arguments erupted over equipment assignments. Accusations of favorable conditions flew between shooters who had been friends the week before. Only Kira remained untouched by the chaos, moving through her duties with mechanical precision while her notebook filled with calculations no one had requested. That evening, Lieutenant Commander Vance found her alone on the observation deck, watching the stars emerge over the desert. He approached without attempting to mask his footsteps. Surprising someone like her seemed unwise. Your calculations from yesterday. Vance kept his voice neutral. They exceed anything our analytics team has produced. Kira did not turn to face him. I enjoy mathematics. It passes the time. That is not what those pages represent, and we both know it. Who taught you ballistics at that level? The desert stretched before them, vast and indifferent. Kira remained silent for so long that Vance thought she might not answer at all. My mother was a mathematics professor at MIT. My father was a Marine Scout sniper. I learned numbers from her. I learned what to do with them from him. Vance processed this information. He had pulled her service record that afternoon, finding it remarkably thin for someone with her years in service. Entire deployments were missing. Commendations that should have existed based on her assignments were absent. The gaps told a story that the official documents refused to acknowledge. I want to submit your name for the remaining attempts. We have 2 days left, and no one has come close. For the first time since he approached, Kira turned to look at him. Her eyes held something he could not immediately identify. Not hope, not gratitude, something older and heavier. Master Chief Harlow controls the selection process. He will not approve my participation. Then I will go above him. Kira shook her head slowly. Do not fight battles on my behalf, Lieutenant Commander. I have learned that some walls are not meant to be climbed. They are meant to be waited out. She left him standing on the observation deck with more questions than answers. Vance watched her disappear into the darkness between buildings, moving with the silence of someone who had learned to walk without sound in places where sound meant death. He found Webb smoking near the motor pool an hour later. The senior chief regarded his approach with the wariness of a man who had already guessed why Vance was seeking him out. You know something about her? Vance did not frame it as a question. Webb exhaled smoke toward the stars. I know lots of things about lots of people. Kandahar. The word hung between them. Her file has an 18-month gap that starts right before that deployment. Webb dropped his cigarette and crushed it beneath his boot. He met Vance's eyes with an expression that communicated more than words ever could. You're looking into the wrong records, sir. The mission that matters is not in any file you have clearance to see. Before Vance could respond, Webb walked away into the Nevada night, leaving behind only the smell of tobacco and the growing certainty that Chief Petty Officer Kira Okonkwo was far more than anyone on this proving ground understood. Somewhere in the darkness, Kira sat alone in her quarters. The photograph she held showed a man in SEAL gear, his smile bright against the Afghan dust that covered everything in that place. She traced the outline of his face with one finger, the gesture so gentle it seemed impossible from hands trained to kill at impossible distances. Tomorrow would bring more failures, more mockery from Harlow, more silence from her own lips. But tonight, in the privacy of darkness, Kira allowed herself to remember the voice of the man in the photograph, the way he had always believed in her, even when she could not believe in herself. She put the photograph away and began reviewing her calculations for the 4,000-meter shot. The numbers were beautiful in their precision. The numbers never lied. The numbers never left. The numbers were all she had now. Day 3 arrived with winds that shifted every 40 seconds, turning the already impossible shot into something approaching absurdity. The meteorological team called it the worst conditions they had recorded since the proving grounds opened. Master Chief Harlow called it an opportunity to separate true marksmen from pretenders. Competitors 4 through 8 took their positions throughout the morning. Each approached the firing line with rituals born from years of training and superstition. One kissed a medallion from his daughter. Another whispered prayers in Spanish before settling behind his rifle. A third simply stared at the distant target for 7 full minutes before chambering his first round. None of it mattered. The 4,000-meter target remained untouched. Kira documented each attempt in her notebook, recording not just the results, but the micro-adjustments each shooter failed to make. The pattern was clear to her now. Every competitor was fighting the wind as an enemy to be defeated. None of them understood that the wind was not an obstacle. It was a river. You did not fight a river. You learned its currents and let it carry you where you needed to go. The morning's fourth failure belonged to a DevGru operator named Hawkins who had once made a confirmed kill at 2,800 meters in Afghanistan. He walked away from the firing line with his jaw clenched so tight that Kira could see the muscles twitching from across the observation room. Hawkins stopped near the equipment table where she was cataloging ammunition and slammed his palm against the surface hard enough to scatter brass casings across the floor. This whole thing is pointless. Nobody is making this shot. Not today. Not ever. Kira bent to collect the scattered casings without comment. Hawkins glared at her silence, mistaking it for judgment. You got something to say, Chief? She straightened and met his eyes with an expression that revealed nothing. No, sir. Just doing my job. Hawkins held her gaze for a moment longer, searching for something to justify his anger. Finding nothing, he stormed toward the exit, leaving Kira to finish cleaning up his mess alone. Marcus Chun approached the firing line at 1400 hours. His hands had steadied since Kira adjusted his rifle, and his breathing showed the controlled rhythm of someone who had mastered at least the mental aspects of long-distance shooting. Vance watched from the observation room as the young petty officer settled into position with more confidence than he had shown on day 1. The first shot missed by 15 feet. the second by 12. Chun adjusted his position, consulted with his spotter, and fired a third round that came within 9 feet of the target. It was the closest anyone had come in 3 days of competition. Harlow noted the result without enthusiasm. Still a miss, gentlemen. Next shooter. Chun walked off the firing line with his head held higher than any competitor before him. He found Kira near the ammunition storage and stopped in front of her, waiting until she looked up from her work. 9 feet. His voice carried quiet pride. Closest of the whole competition. Kira allowed the smallest nod of acknowledgement. Your breathing was correct. Your trigger pull was clean. You understood the wind better than the others. But it was not enough. No, it was not. Chun hesitated, glancing around to ensure they were alone. What would you have done differently if you were taking that shot? Kira's pen stopped moving over her inventory sheet. The question hung between them, weighted with implications that both of them understood. She was not supposed to have opinions about shooting. She was support personnel. She was here to count bullets, not fire them. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. The Coriolis effect at that distance creates a drift of approximately 4 inches that nobody is accounting for. The thermal layers between here and the target create 3 distinct wind channels that cannot be read from the firing position. And the elevation calculations everyone is using assume a standard atmospheric density that does not exist in this desert at this altitude. Chun stared at her. That is. He stopped. How do you know all of that? Kira returned to her inventory sheet. I enjoy mathematics. That is not mathematics. That is expertise that takes years to develop. That is knowledge that comes from actually making shots like this. Before Kira could respond, a shadow fell across the ammunition table. Master Chief Harlow stood 3 feet away, his expression carved from stone. Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo, are you providing tactical consultation to competition participants? Kira set down her pen and rose to attention. No, Master Chief. Petty Officer Chun was asking about ammunition specifications. Harlow's eyes moved between them, measuring the lie against his suspicions. He turned to Chun with a smile that contained no warmth. Petty Officer Chun, I am reassigning you to equipment maintenance for the remainder of the competition. Report to the motor pool immediately. Chun's face went pale. Master Chief, I still have attempts remaining in my allocation. Did I stutter, Petty Officer? The younger man's hands curled into fists at his sides. He looked at Kira, who stood motionless with her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond Harlow's shoulder. No, Master Chief. Chen's voice was tight with controlled fury. I will report to the motor pool. He gathered his gear and walked away without looking back. Harlow waited until he was gone before stepping closer to Kira. I know what you are doing. His voice was low enough that only she could hear. I know what you think you are, but let me be perfectly clear about something. You will never touch a competition rifle. You will never offer advice to my shooters. And you will never make the shot that you believe you can make. Some people are meant for greatness. Others are meant to serve those who achieve it. He held her gaze for 5 long seconds before turning and walking away. Kira remained at attention until his footsteps faded completely. Then she sat back down, picked up her pen, and returned to her inventory with hands that did not tremble. In her notebook, beneath the columns of ammunition counts, she added one more calculation to her growing collection. The number represented the exact adjustment needed to account for every variable Harlow's shooters were ignoring. The shot was possible. She had always known it was possible. The question was whether anyone would ever let her prove it. The 4th day opened with a visitor that nobody expected. Admiral Catherine Cross arrived by helicopter at 0600, her presence sending ripples of anxiety through every officer on the proving grounds. Flag officers did not simply appear at classified testing facilities without reason. Something had changed. Kira watched the Admiral's entourage move toward the command building from her position near the equipment hangar. Cross walked with the confidence of someone who had earned her stars through decades of service rather than political maneuvering. Her reputation preceded her throughout the special operations community. Fair, demanding, impossible to deceive. Competitors 9 through 11 took their shots that morning under the Admiral's observation. Each failure seemed to darken her expression further. By noon, the Proving Grounds had witnessed 11 consecutive defeats, and the whispers about canceling the program had grown into open conversation. Dr. Amara Osei arrived with the Admiral's Party, a ballistics expert from the Naval Surface Warfare Center whose published work on extreme long-range shooting had become required reading at every sniper school in the country. She spent the morning reviewing the competition's technical data with growing concern on her face. Vance found the doctor alone in the analysis tent during the lunch break, surrounded by printouts covered in red ink corrections. Problems with our methodology? He kept his tone casual despite his genuine curiosity. Dr. Osei looked up with frustration evident in her eyes. Your methodology is fine. Standard protocols executed correctly. But standard protocols will not achieve this shot. Someone in your analytics team is using atmospheric density tables from 1987. The compensation factors are outdated by nearly 4%. Vance felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. He reached into his pocket and produced his phone, pulling up the photographs he had taken from Kira's notebook. What about these calculations? Dr. Osei took the phone and began scrolling through the images. Her expression shifted from polite interest to genuine surprise, to something approaching amazement. Where did you get these? One of our support personnel, Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo. The doctor looked up sharply. Kira Okongu. She is here? You know her? Dr. Osei handed back the phone with a strange smile. We corresponded 3 years ago about a theoretical paper I was writing. She identified 17 errors in my math before I published. I offer her a position on my research team. She declined without explanation. Vance absorbed this information. The picture of Kira Okonkwo was becoming clearer and more confusing with every new detail he uncovered. A woman who could correct the work of the Navy's leading ballistics expert. A woman who had been present for classified operations that left no official trace. A woman who sat in silence while lesser shooters failed at a task she might be capable of completing. He needed to speak with Admiral Cross. The opportunity came that afternoon when Cross requested a private briefing on the competition's progress. Vance laid out the situation with military precision. 11 failures. 2 days remaining. Diminishing likelihood of success. Then he mentioned Kira Okonkwo. Cross listened without interruption as Vance described the notebook calculations, the conversation with Dr. Osei, and the mysterious gaps in her service record. When he finished, the Admiral sat in silence for a long moment. Why is she not competing? Master Chief Harlow excluded her from the selection process. He classified her as support personnel only. Cross's expression hardened. Pull up the original selection criteria. Vance produced the documents. Cross reviewed them for less than 30 seconds before looking up. There is nothing here that disqualifies Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo. Her marksmanship scores alone should have guaranteed her inclusion. Who authorized this exclusion? Harlow Mong. He made the selections personally. Bring him to me. Now, the confrontation that followed would become legend among those who witnessed it. Harlow stood at rigid attention while Admiral Cross systematically dismantled every justification he offered for excluding Kira from competition. Support personnel designation was my judgment call based on unit needs, ma'am. Your judgment call directly contradicts her qualification scores. Try again. Her psychological profile suggests she may not perform under pressure. Her psychological evaluations are exemplary. Every single one. Try again. Harlow's composure finally cracked. With respect, Admiral, there are factors in her background that make her unsuitable for this level of responsibility. Cross leaned forward. Factors that are classified above your clearance level, Master Chief. Factors that I have full access to. Factors that should have made her your first selection, not your deliberate exclusion. The blood drained from Harlow's face. He had not known. Whatever secrets existed in Kira's past, he had been operating on assumptions rather than facts. Admiral Cross stood. Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo will be added to tomorrow's competition roster. You will inform her personally. And Master Chief, if I discover that any obstacle is placed in her path between now and her attempt, I will end your career before sunset. Dismissed. Harlow saluted and left without another word. Vance remained behind as Cross moved to the window overlooking the proving grounds. "Ma'am, if I may ask, what exactly is in her classified file?" Cross did not turn around. She was present for Operation Crimson Veil. Kandahar Province. 3 years ago, Vance felt cold despite the desert heat. Crimson Veil was a legend among special operators. A mission so sensitive that even acknowledging its name was technically a security violation. The official story is that the mission succeeded due to exceptional teamwork. Cross finally turned to face him. The truth is that one shooter made one shot that saved 37 American lives. A shot that should have been impossible. The Admiral's eyes carried the weight of knowledge that few would ever share. That shooter was Kira Okonkwo, and the shot she made that day was 4,200 meters. The final two competitors took their shots on the morning of Day 5. Neither came closer than 14 feet. When the last round echoed across the desert and the target remained untouched, Master Chief Harlow addressed the assembled observers with barely concealed satisfaction. 13 of the finest marksmen in special operations have attempted this shot. 13 have failed. The evidence is clear. The 4,000-meter shot is beyond current human capability. I recommend we terminate this program and allocate resources to more achievable objectives. Admiral Cross remained silent throughout his assessment. When Harlow finished, she simply nodded and dismissed the group for lunch. No announcement about Kira. No mention of the confrontation from the previous day. Harlow allowed himself a small smile as he walked away. Kira spent the morning in the base chapel. She had not prayed in years, not since the dust of Kandahar had filled her lungs and her faith along with it. But the chapel offered something she needed more than prayer. Silence. True silence. Without the weight of expectation or the pressure of concealment. She sat in the last pew with Daniel's photograph in her hands. The image had faded slightly over 3 years of handling, the colors bleeding together at the edges where her fingers had worn the paper thin. He looked so alive in that frozen moment, so certain that tomorrow would come. The door opened behind her. She did not turn, but she recognized the footsteps. Senior Chief Webb moved down the aisle and settled into the pew beside her without invitation. For a long time, neither spoke. "I was there." Webb's voice was barely above a whisper. "Kandahar. I was on the extraction team. We heard the shot from 3 kilometers away. Thought it was thunder at first." Kira's grip tightened on the photograph. "When we reached the compound, 37 men were walking out alive because of what you did." Webb paused. "Danny would have been 38. But that was not your fault." She closed her eyes. The memory crashed over her like a wave she had been holding back for 3 years. Kandahar Province. Operation Crimson Veil. The mission had been straightforward on paper. Eliminate a high-value target before he could execute 3 dozen American prisoners. Kira had been positioned on a ridge 4,200 meters from the compound, farther than any sniper had ever attempted under combat conditions. Daniel Reeves had been her spotter, lying beside her in the Afghan dust, calling wind corrections with a calm precision that had made him legendary. The target had appeared in her scope at 1432. She had calculated the shot in seconds. Finger on trigger, breathing controlled, ready. Then the child had walked into frame. A boy, maybe 8 years old, standing directly behind the target, invisible from any other angle. If she fired, the round would pass through the target and kill the child. Guaranteed. Physics did not negotiate. She had 2 seconds to decide. Take the shot and kill an innocent. Hold fire and watch 37 Americans die. Kira had done neither. In a fraction of a heartbeat, she recalculated the entire shot. New angle, new compensation, a trajectory that would curve the round 3 inches to the left, striking the target's temple instead of center mass. It would work. It had to work. She adjusted. She fired. The bullet traveled for nearly 7 seconds across 4,200 meters of Afghan air. The target dropped. The child stood frozen, splattered with blood that was not his own, but alive. The prisoners began moving toward extraction. But those 2 seconds of recalculation had cost her. Daniel had risen slightly to get a better view of the compound, believing the shot was already taken. An enemy sniper who had been searching for their position finally found it. Daniel was dead before Kira could chamber another round. She had made the impossible shot. She had saved 37 lives and 1 innocent child, and she had lost the only person who had ever truly seen her. The silence in the chapel stretched between Kira and Webb like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Danny used to say you were the best he had ever seen. Webb's voice was gentle. He said you would surpass every record in the book if they ever gave you the chance. Kira finally opened her eyes. They killed him because I hesitated. They killed him because war is chaos and death does not ask permission. Webb turned to face her fully. You made an impossible choice in an impossible moment. You saved 38 lives, including that boy. Danny knew the risks. We all do. She shook her head slowly. I have not taken a shot that mattered since that day. I cannot trust myself. Webb reached out and placed his weathered hand over hers. That is not your decision anymore. Admiral Cross knows everything. She is giving you the chance Danny always believed you deserved. Kira looked up sharply. What? You are on tomorrow's roster. Official competitor. The Admiral overruled Harlow personally. The photograph trembled in her hands. She looked down at Daniel's faded smile, at the certainty in his eyes that she had never been able to find in herself. I do not know if I can do this. Webb squeezed her hand once before rising. Danny would tell you the same thing he always told you. Breathe. Trust the math. And stop being afraid of being extraordinary. He walked out of the chapel, leaving Kira alone with her ghosts and the terrifying possibility that tomorrow might finally be the day she stopped hiding from who she really was. Outside, the Nevada sun continued its slow descent toward the horizon. Somewhere on the proving grounds, Master Chief Harlow was about to receive the order that would shatter everything he believed about women in combat. And in the chapel, Kira Okonkwo pressed Daniel's photograph to her heart and whispered 3 words she had not spoken in 3 years. I will try. The news spread through the proving grounds like wildfire in dry brush. The quiet woman from the equipment table had been added to the competition roster. Master Chief Harlow had been overruled by Admiral Cross herself. Tomorrow morning, Chief Petty Officer Kira Okonkwo would attempt the shot that 13 elite snipers had failed to make. Reactions varied predictably. Some competitors dismissed her chances with the casual cruelty of men who had never been forced to prove themselves against institutional doubt. Others remembered her help with Chen's rifle and her calculations that had circulated in whispered rumors. A few simply watched and waited, curious to see what would unfold. Kira spent the evening in the ballistics lab with Dr. Osei. The 2 women had not spoken since their brief correspondence 3 years earlier, but they fell into collaboration with the ease of minds that operated on the same frequency. Your calculations account for factors that our official models ignore entirely. Dr. Osei scrolled through Kira's notebook with undisguised admiration. The thermal stratification analysis alone is worth a doctoral thesis. Kira studied the lab's atmospheric readouts without responding to the compliment. Tomorrow's conditions will be different. The wind patterns are shifting. I need updated data. Dr. Osei pulled up the meteorological projections. What she saw made her frown. The forecast shows highly variable conditions. Gusts up to 30 knots with direction changes every 60 to 90 seconds. These may be the worst shooting conditions of the entire competition. Then the calculations will need to be perfect. They worked through the night, refining variables and running simulations on equipment that had not existed when Kira first learned to shoot. By dawn, they had produced a targeting solution that accounted for every measurable factor between the firing line and the target 4,000 meters away. But Kira knew what Dr. Osei's computers could not quantify. The moment of the shot existed beyond mathematics. It lived in the space between heartbeats, in the pause between breaths, in the silence that separated intention from action. No simulation could replicate that instant. No algorithm could guarantee success. She left the lab as the first light touched the desert, and found Admiral Cross waiting outside. Chief Petty Officer. The Admiral fell into step beside her. I understand you and Dr. Osei have been working through the night. Yes, ma'am. Cross walked in silence for several paces before speaking again. I read the full debrief from Crimson Veil, the unredacted version. Kira's stride did not falter, but her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You made a choice that day that most operators would never have considered. You risked the entire mission to save one child, and you still completed the objective. I also got my spotter killed. Cross stopped walking, forcing Kira to halt and face her. Senior Chief Reeves was killed by an enemy combatant who had been searching for your position for 6 hours. His death was not the result of your decision. It was the result of war. Kira met the Admiral's eyes. With respect, ma'am, you're not there. No, I was not. Cross held her gaze without flinching. But I have read every after-action report, every witness statement, every ballistic analysis of what you accomplished that day. I have also read Daniel Reeves' service record. Do you know what his final evaluation said about you? Kira shook her head slowly. He wrote that you were the most gifted natural shooter he had ever encountered. He wrote that your only limitation was your refusal to believe in your own abilities. He wrote that, given the opportunity, you would redefine what was possible in long-range marksmanship. The words struck Kira like physical blows. She had never seen Daniel's evaluations. She had never known what he truly thought of her potential. Cross continued. The competition today is not just a test. There is an operation pending. 7 American hostages being held in a compound that cannot be approached by conventional means. The only viable solution requires a shooter who can make a shot beyond 4,000 meters. Kira understood immediately. You knew I was here. You knew about Kandahar. This entire competition was designed to find me. The Admiral neither confirmed nor denied the accusation. I needed to know if you could still perform under pressure. I needed to see if the woman who made that shot 3 years ago still existed. And if I fail today, then 7 Americans will likely die, and we will have to find another way. Cross paused. But I do not believe you will fail. Neither did Daniel Reeves. The question is whether you believe it yourself. She walked away without waiting for a response, leaving Kira alone in the pale morning light. The proving grounds were already filling with observers when Kira made her way to the firing line. She saw Vance speaking with Webb near the observation platform. She saw Dr. Osei checking the wind monitoring equipment one final time. She saw Marcus Chun standing apart from the other competitors, his eyes finding hers across the distance with something that looked like hope. And she saw Master Chief Harlow. He stood directly in her path, blocking her route to the equipment station where her rifle waited. His face was unreadable, but his posture communicated everything his expression concealed. Chief Petty Officer. His voice carried no warmth. Before you proceed, there is something you should know. Kira stopped 3 feet from him. She did not speak. She simply waited. My daughter was a combat medic. Harlow's voice dropped so low that only she could hear. They told her she was ready for forward deployment. She believed them. She was 22 years old. For the first time, Kira saw something other than contempt in his eyes. She saw grief, ancient and unprocessed, and twisted into something ugly by years of misdirection. She died because someone put her in a position she could not handle. Harlow's hands trembled slightly at his sides. I have spent every day since then trying to prevent that from happening to anyone else. I looked at you, and I saw another woman being set up to fail. Another career about to end in tragedy. Kira held his gaze without blinking. Your daughter did not die because she was a woman. She died because war does not discriminate. Harlow flinched as though she had struck him. I'm not your daughter. Kira stepped past him toward the equipment station. And this is not your decision to make. She collected her rifle and walked toward the firing line, leaving Master Chief Vincent Harlow standing alone with the weight of his grief and the dawning realization that he had been fighting the wrong enemy for a very long time. The firing line stretched before Kira like a threshold between who she had been and who she might become. She settled into position with movements so practiced they required no conscious thought. Rifle seated against shoulder, cheek welded to stock. I aligned with scope, body melting into the earth until shooter and weapon became a single instrument of precision. Webb took his position beside her as spotter. He had not been assigned to the role. He had simply appeared at her side when she reached the line, and no one had questioned his presence. Some bonds transcended official orders. Wind is coming from the southeast at 12 knots. Webb's voice carried the calm cadence of a man who had called thousands of shots. Gusting to 18. Temperature is climbing. You will need to adjust for thermal expansion on the barrel. Kira made the calculations without responding. Her notebook lay open beside her, but she did not need to reference it. The numbers live in her mind now, as natural as breathing. The observation platform had filled with every officer and competitor on the proving grounds. Admiral Cross stood at the center with Dr. Osei at her side. Vance had positioned himself near the communications equipment, ready to relay results. Even Marcus Chun had abandoned his punishment duty at the motor pool, risking Harlow's wrath to witness what was about to unfold. Harlow himself stood apart from the others, his arms crossed over his chest, and his expression locked in careful neutrality. Whatever he felt about Kira's attempt, he had chosen to keep it hidden. The range officer's voice crackled through the speakers. Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo, you are cleared hot. 3 rounds allocated. Call your shots. Kira chambered her first round. The metallic sound seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence that had fallen over the proving grounds. Through her scope, the target wavered in the heat mirages rising from the desert floor. For 1,000 meters of air filled with variables that shifted every second. Wind, temperature, humidity, atmospheric pressure, Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation. Each factor demanded compensation. Each compensation created new factors to consider. She had made this shot before. Farther, even. But that had been 3 years ago, with Daniel breathing steadily beside her and 37 lives hanging in the balance. Today the stakes were different. Today she was not saving anyone. Today she was simply proving that she could. First round is calibration. Webb understood her methodology without needing explanation. Send it when ready. Kira exhaled slowly, letting her heartbeat settle into the rhythm that Daniel had taught her years ago. Between beats, in the space where blood paused in its journey through her veins, she found the stillness she needed. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The report echoed across the desert. For 6 long seconds, the bullet traveled through air and heat and wind toward a target that seemed impossibly distant. Mississippi 12 feet, right 4 feet high. Webb's voice remained steady. Wind shifted during flight. Adjust for a stronger southeast component. Kira processed the data instantly. Her first shot had not been intended to hit. It had been intended to teach her things that no instrument could measure. The way the air moved between here and there. The way the heat bent light and trajectory. The way this particular desert breathed on this particular morning. She chambered her second round. The observers on the platform shifted restlessly. 12 feet was not promising. The best competitor had missed by 9, and he had been shooting for 3 days before achieving that result. Whispers began to circulate. Perhaps the Admiral had been wrong. Perhaps the quiet woman was just another failure waiting to happen. Kira ignored them all. The world beyond her scope had ceased to exist. There was only the target, the wind, and the mathematics that connected them. Second round adjusting 7.3 minutes right, 2.1 minutes down. Webb translated her adjustment for the official record. Shooter is ready. This time, Kira did not wait for her heartbeat to settle. She fired in the space between gusts, trusting her instincts to find the window that her calculations had predicted. The bullet flew. 6 seconds stretched into eternity. Mississippi. 3 feet left, 1 foot low. Webb's voice carried a new note, something that sounded almost like wonder. That is the closest anyone has come. Adjust 0.4 minutes right, 0.2 minutes up. 3 feet. Kira had cut the distance by 75% with a single adjustment. The whispers on the observation platform changed tone. This was not another failure. This was something none of them had ever witnessed. She reached for her third and final round. Marcus Chen's voice cut through the silence. "Come on, Chief. You have got this." Other voices joined his. Competitors who had dismissed her that morning now called encouragement. Officers who had doubted her qualifications now watched with held breath. Even Harlow had uncrossed his arms, his hands hanging at his sides, as though he no longer knew what to do with them. Webb leaned closer, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "Danny would be proud of you, no matter what happens next." Kira closed her eyes for a single breath. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw Daniel's face, not twisted in death, but alive and laughing, the way he had looked on the morning of their last mission together. She heard his voice, steady and warm, speaking the words he had said to her 1,000 times. "Breathe, trust the math, and stop being afraid of being extraordinary." She opened her eyes. She chambered the final round. She settled the crosshairs on a target that every expert had declared impossible to hit. And somewhere in the space between heartbeats, Kira Okonkwo stopped being afraid. The crosshairs held steady on the center of the target. Kira's breathing had slowed to 4 cycles per minute. Each inhale and exhale measured with the precision of a metronome. Her finger rested on the trigger with exactly 2 pounds of pressure, waiting for the moment when instinct and mathematics would converge into action. Then the wind shifted, not gradually, as it had been doing all morning, but violently. A gust swept across the proving grounds from the northwest, a direction that had shown no activity in any of the meteorological readings. Dr. Osei's instruments had not predicted it. Kira's calculations had not accounted for it. Webb cursed under his breath. Wind shift, northwest at 22 knots. That is not in any of our models. Kira did not move. Through her scope, she watched the heat mirages twist and dance as the new wind patterns disrupted everything she had prepared for. Her targeting solution was now worthless. Every calculation she and Dr. Osei had refined through the night had just become obsolete. On the observation platform, Admiral Cross leaned forward. Dr. Osei frantically adjusted her instruments, tried to make sense of the sudden change. The competitors exchanged glances that ranged from sympathetic to grimly satisfied. Nature itself seemed determined to prevent this shot from succeeding. The computer systems on the range began recalculating, but their processors were not designed for this level of complexity. Warning lights flickered on Dr. Osei's console. Systems are overloaded. Her voice carried across the sudden chaos. "We need at least 10 minutes to generate new targeting data." The range officer reached for his microphone. "Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo, we're calling a hold while systems recalibrate. Stand down and safe your weapon." Kira did not acknowledge the order. Her eye remained pressed to the scope, her body still fused with the rifle and the earth beneath her. Webb touched her shoulder. "Kira, they're calling a hold. We can wait for the computers to catch up." She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have been waiting 3 years. The 7 people who need this shot do not have time to wait." Webb stared at her. "You cannot make this calculation in your head. Not with these conditions. Nobody can." Kira's lips moved silently, numbers flowing through her mind faster than any computer could process them. Wind speed, direction, temperature differential, humidity shift, Coriolis compensation, barrel temperature, bullet drop, spin drift, the mathematics of impossibility. Daniel had always said that her gift was not her eyesight or her steady hands. Her gift was the ability to see numbers as living things, to feel equations the way musicians felt melody. In Kandahar, she had recalculated a 4,200-meter shot in 2 seconds to save a child's life. She had done it without instruments, without computers, without anything except the numbers that lived in her blood. She could do it again. "Range officer." Kira's voice cut through the chaos with absolute calm. "I am not standing down. I'm taking the shot." Admiral Cross held up her hand, stopping the range officer's protest before it could form. "Let her shoot." Silence fell over the proving grounds. Every observer understood what they were witnessing. A woman attempting to calculate in seconds what supercomputers required minutes to process. A shooter trusting her mind over every technological advantage the modern military could provide. Webb settled back into his position beside her. His voice was steady despite the impossibility of what she was attempting. "Call it when you are ready." Kira closed her eyes. The numbers cascaded through her consciousness like water, finding its path down a mountainside. Each variable connected to the next in patterns that only she could see. The wind was not chaos. It was a river with currents she could read. The heat was not distortion. It was a lens she could adjust for. The distance was not an obstacle. It was simply a problem waiting to be solved. She opened her eyes. The crosshairs settled on a point that no targeting computer would have selected. A point that existed only in the mathematics of her mind. Adjusting 14.7 minutes right. Kira's voice was mechanical, detached, as though she were reading from a manual that only she could see. 8.3 minutes up, compensating for thermal gradient shift in sectors 2 through 7, accounting for northwest gust decay over distance. Webb did not question her numbers. He simply recorded them for posterity. The world contracted to a single point of focus. Target. Crosshairs. Trigger. The space between heartbeats stretched into infinity. In her mind, Daniel's voice whispered one final time. "Breathe." Kira exhaled. Her heart paused between beats. Her finger increased pressure on the trigger by exactly 1.4 pounds. The rifle spoke. The recoil pushed against her shoulder with familiar force. The report rolled across the desert like thunder. And then there was nothing but waiting. 6 seconds of flight time. 6 seconds for a small piece of copper and lead to travel nearly 2.5 miles through air that had conspired against it. 1 second. 2. 3. On the observation platform, no one breathed. 4 seconds. 5. Webb pressed his eye to the spotting scope, tracking the vapor trail as it arced across the Nevada sky. 6 seconds. The target shuddered. For a moment, nobody moved. The impact had been so precise, so clean, that it seemed almost unreal. Then Dr. Osei's voice broke the silence, trembling with something between disbelief and awe. "Center mass." She read the instruments 3 times before speaking again. "Dead center, for 1,000 meters." First confirmed hit in the history of this program. The proving grounds erupted. Competitors surged forward. Officers shouted congratulations. Marcus Chun pumped his fist in the air with a whoop that echoed off the distant mountains. But Kira did not move. She remained in position, her eyes still pressed to the scope, her breathing still controlled to 4 cycles per minute. Webb noticed first. "Kira, you did it. It is over." Her response was quiet, meant only for him. That was the proof of concept. Now I need to make the shot that actually matters. She shifted her position slightly, her eye never leaving the scope. "Get Admiral Cross. Tell her we are ready for the real mission." Webb stared at her for a long moment. Then he rose and walked toward the observation platform, leaving Kira alone with her rifle and the knowledge that today's victory was only the beginning. 4,000 meters was history. The hostages needed 4,100. The briefing room cleared within minutes of Admiral Cross's order. Only essential personnel remained. Kira, Webb, Vance, Dr. Osei, and the Admiral herself, who stood before a satellite image that showed a compound nestled in mountains that officially belonged to no nation. 7 American contractors were taken 48 hours ago. Cross traced the compound's perimeter with her finger. They're being held here in the central building. The captors have announced an execution timeline. We have 36 hours before the first hostage dies. Vance studied the terrain. Conventional approach is impossible. Those mountains create a natural fortress. Any assault team would be detected kilometers before reaching the target, which is why we need a different approach. Cross zoomed the image to reveal a ridge overlooking the compound. This position offers a clear line of sight to the compound's external security station. 1 shooter, 1 shot. The security station controls all communications and surveillance for the facility. Take it out, and our assault team can approach undetected. Kira examined the distance calculation displayed beneath the image. 4,100 meters. Dr. Osei pulled up atmospheric data. Conditions at that location will be challenging. High altitude, thin air, unpredictable mountain winds. This shot will be harder than what you just accomplished. Kira nodded slowly. Where do we deploy? Wheels up in 4 hours. Cross met her eyes. I will not order you to do this, Chief. This is volunteer only. But you're the only shooter we have who has demonstrated capability at this range. The weight of 7 lives settled onto Kira's shoulders. She thought of Daniel. She thought of the 37 men who had walked out of Kandahar because she had found the courage to pull a trigger. She thought of the child who had lived because she refused to accept that impossible choices had only 2 options. I volunteer. The next 4 hours blurred into controlled chaos. Kira selected her rifle personally, a custom weapon she had modified over years of deployment. Webb insisted on accompanying her as spotter despite not being officially assigned. Vance would coordinate communications from a mobile command post. Dr. Osei uploaded every atmospheric model she could generate to a tablet that would accompany them to the ridge. Marcus Chun found Kira in the equipment bay as she conducted final checks on her gear. I heard about the mission. His voice was quiet. I wanted to say good luck. And thank you for everything you taught me. Kira posted inspection. I did not teach you anything. I adjusted your scope. Chun shook his head. You taught me that the best shooters are not the ones who never doubt themselves. They're the ones who doubt themselves and pull the trigger anyway. She studied the young man's face, seeing echoes of herself from years ago. Eager, uncertain, desperate to prove worthy of the uniform. When I get back, she said slowly, I'm going to recommend you for advanced sniper training. You have potential. Do not waste it. Chin's eyes widened. He started to respond, but Kira had already turned back to her equipment. Some conversations did not require conclusions. The transport lifted off at 2200 hours. Kira sat in the cargo bay with her rifle across her knees, watching the Nevada desert fall away beneath them. Webb settled into the seat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You know what Danny told me once? Webb's voice barely carried over the engine noise. He said that you're the only person he ever met who could see the whole world as mathematics. He said it was like you could read the code, that everything was written in. Kira stared at the rifle in her hands. He never told me that. He never told you a lot of things. Webb paused. He was afraid that if you knew how special you were, you would start believing it, and then you would stop working to prove it. The transport banked eastward, carrying them toward mountains that would test everything Kira had ever learned about her craft. She closed her eyes and let the vibration of the aircraft fill her bones. In her mind, she began calculating. Wind patterns at high altitude, air density at elevation, temperature differentials between the ridge and the target. The mathematics of salvation. They landed in darkness on a plateau 12 kilometers from the target compound. The assault team was already in position, waiting for Kira's shot to open their window of opportunity. She had 3 hours to reach the ridge, establish her position, and eliminate a target that would determine whether 7 Americans lived or died. The climb was brutal. Thin air burned in her lungs. Loose rock threatened to send her tumbling with every step. Webb stayed close behind her, carrying the spotting scope and additional ammunition that she prayed she would not need. They reached the ridge as the first light of dawn touched the eastern horizon. Below them, the compound sprawled across a narrow valley. Kira could see movement near the central building. Guards changing shifts, vehicles moving between structures, and somewhere inside those walls, 7 people waiting to learn if today would be their last. She settled into position with the ease of long practice. Scope aligned, rifle seated, breathing controlled. Webb set up beside her and began calling readings. Wind from the southwest at 8 knots. Temperature rising. Humidity at 12%. Range confirmed at 4,100 meters. Kira adjusted her scope, translating his numbers into the minute calculations that would guide her bullet across nearly 2.5 miles of mountain air. Then she saw something that made her blood freeze. On the opposite ridge, barely visible against the gray stone, a glint of light reflected off glass. Another scope, another shooter, someone who had arrived before them. Webb. Kira kept her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Northwest Ridge, 800 meters below the summit. We have company. Webb shifted his spotting scope. His sharp intake of breath confirmed what she already knew. Enemy sniper. He is positioned to cover the hostage building. If he sees our assault team, he will have a clear shot at the hostages during extraction. Kira processed the tactical reality instantly. 2 targets, 2 different ranges. The security station at 4,100 meters. The enemy sniper at 3,800. Both had to be eliminated simultaneously, or the mission would fail and 7 Americans would die. She had trained her entire career for single targets at impossible distances. Nobody trained for this, but nobody had trained her for Kandahar either. And she had found a way. I can make both shots. The words left her mouth before she consciously formed them. I need you to calculate the timing differential. Webb stared at her. That is not possible. Kira chambered her first round. Then we are about to make it possible. Start calculating. Webb ran the calculations 3 times before he trusted the numbers. The security station shot would require 6.2 seconds of flight time. The enemy sniper shot would require 5.4 seconds. If Kira fired both rounds within 0.8 seconds of each other, they would impact their targets simultaneously. 0.8 seconds. Webb shook his head. That is less than a single heartbeat between trigger pulls. Kira adjusted her position, calculating angles that would allow her to transition between targets with minimal movement. Her body became a machine, every muscle memory from 15 years of training aligning toward this single impossible moment. I will take the security station first. Longer flight time means I fire first, then transition to the sniper. You will have no time to reacquire, no time to verify your first shot landed. You will be firing blind on the second target. I know. The assault team's voice crackled through Webb's earpiece. Overwatch, this is Alpha. We are in position, waiting on your green light. Webb looked at Kira. She lay motionless behind her rifle, her eye pressed to the scope, her breathing so slow it seemed she had stopped entirely. In all his years of service, he had never witnessed focus this absolute, this terrifying. Alpha, standby. Webb kept his voice level. Overwatch is preparing to engage. We have a complication. 2 targets. Simultaneous elimination required. A pause. Then the assault team leader responded. Understood. Waiting on your signal. The sun continued its climb over the eastern peaks. In minutes, the light would shift enough to potentially reveal their position to the enemy sniper. The window was closing. Kira made her final adjustments. Security station windage set. Elevation set. Sniper position windage calculated. Elevation calculated. The numbers lived in her mind like music, each variable harmonizing with the next. She thought of Daniel. Not the memory of his death, but the memory of his life. The way he had believed in her when no one else did. The way he had pushed her to accept her own extraordinary capabilities. The way he had loved her without ever needing to say the words. This shot was not redemption. Redemption implied she had done something wrong. This shot was continuation. The next step in a journey that Daniel had started her on years ago. I am ready. Her voice carried no doubt. Webb pressed his eye to the spotting scope. Calling targets. Security station. 4,100 meters. One figure visible in the window. Enemy sniper. 3,800 meters. Prone position behind rock cover. Kira found the security station in her scope. The figure inside was drinking from a cup, unaware that death was being calculated 2.5 miles away. She memorized the target, burned it into her mind. Then she shifted to the enemy sniper, repeating the process. 2 targets, 2 ranges, 0.8 seconds between shots. 1 chance. Initiating engagement sequence. Kira's finger found the trigger. First target acquired. The world contracted to a single point of absolute focus. Her heartbeat slowed. Her breathing paused. Every cell in her body aligned toward the mathematics of salvation. She fired. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. Before the recoil had fully dissipated, before the sound had finished echoing off the mountain walls, she was already moving. Scope shifting. Crosshairs finding the second target, finger returning to the trigger. 0.7 seconds after the first shot, she fired again. 2 bullets flew through mountain air on parallel trajectories toward targets that could not know death was already traveling toward them. 6.2 seconds for the first, 5.4 for the second. Webb counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The enemy sniper's head snapped backward. His rifle clattered against the rocks. He did not move again. 6. The security station window shattered. The figure inside collapsed. Alarms began wailing across the compound, but they were already too late. The communications array sparked and died. The surveillance monitors went dark. Webb's voice cracked with emotion he could not contain. 2 hits. Both confirmed. Targets eliminated. Alpha, you are green. Go, go, go. The assault team surged forward from their concealed positions. They moved like ghosts through the compound's suddenly blind defenses. Kira watched through her scope as they breached the central building, her fingers still resting on the trigger in case any new threats emerged. Minutes stretched like hours. Gunfire echoed from inside the compound. Then silence. Alpha to Overwatch. The assault team leader's voice was breathless. 7 hostages secured. All alive. Extraction in progress. Mission accomplished. Webb let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since they landed. He turned to look at Kira, expecting to see relief or triumph or exhaustion. What he saw instead made him reach out to grip her shoulder. Tears streamed silently down her face. Not tears of sadness. Not tears of joy. Something deeper. Something that had been locked inside her for 3 years, finally finding its way to the surface. I heard him. Her voice was barely a whisper. When I took the shots, I heard Danny's voice. He said he was proud of me. Webb squeezed her shoulder. He did not offer platitudes. He did not tell her it was just her imagination. He simply bore witness to a moment that belonged to her alone. The extraction helicopters thundered overhead, carrying 7 Americans toward safety. Below, the compound burned as demolition charges erased any evidence of the operation. And on the ridge, Kira Okonkwo finally allowed herself to feel the weight of everything she had accomplished. She had made the impossible shot. Twice. Simultaneously. She had saved 7 lives without taking an innocent one. And somewhere, in whatever place heroes go when their work is done, Daniel Reeves was smiling. The transport back to Coronado carried the silence of people who had witnessed something they could not fully comprehend. The assault team members stole glances at Kira throughout the flight, their expressions mixing awe with something approaching reverence. 2 shots, 2 kills, simultaneously at ranges that most snipers would never attempt in their entire careers. She sat apart from them, her rifle still across her knees, her eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the aircraft's small windows. Webb remained beside her, a silent guardian who understood that some victories required solitude to process. They landed at Naval Special Warfare Command as the sun was setting over the Pacific. Admiral Cross waited on the tarmac, flanked by Lieutenant Commander Vance and Dr. Osei. Behind them stood a smaller group that made Kira's breath catch in her throat. 7 civilians. Tired, shaken, but alive. The hostages had insisted on being present when their rescuer returned. They did not know her name. They did not know the details of what she had done. They only knew that somewhere, someone had made the impossible possible, and they wanted to say thank you. Kira descended the transport ramp on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. The first hostage to reach her was a woman in her 50s, an engineer who had been working on infrastructure projects when the compound was attacked. She wrapped her arms around Kira without asking permission, sobbing against her shoulder. Thank you. The woman's voice was broken. Thank you for bringing us home. One by one, the other hostages approached. Handshakes, embraces, words that tumbled out faster than anyone could process. Kira accepted each gesture with the same stillness she brought to everything, but Webb noticed her hands trembling at her sides. When the last hostage had spoken, Admiral Cross stepped forward. Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo, your actions today saved 7 American lives, and eliminated a terrorist communications network that has been responsible for dozens of attacks over the past decade. On behalf of the United States Navy and the Special Operations community, I offer my deepest gratitude. Kira stood at attention. Just doing my job, ma'am. Cross allowed herself a small smile. We both know that is not entirely true. What you accomplished today was extraordinary, and it will remain classified for the foreseeable future. I understand. The Admiral nodded and turned to address the assembled group. Everyone is dismissed. Debriefs will begin at 0800 tomorrow. Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo, a moment please. The others dispersed, leaving Kira alone with Cross on the darkening tarmac. The Admiral waited until they were beyond earshot before speaking again. The competition was never just about proving a capability. Cross's voice carried a weight that went beyond the immediate moment. It was about finding someone who could handle the weight of doing what others cannot. Someone who would not break under the pressure of impossible choices. Kira met her eyes. You knew about Kandahar before the competition started. You knew I could make those shots. I suspected. Cross paused. Daniel Reeves was one of the finest operators I ever had the privilege of commanding. Before his death, he submitted a recommendation that you be considered for advanced training assignments. He believed you had potential that the Navy was failing to develop. The revelation struck Kira like a physical blow. Daniel had never mentioned any recommendation. He had never told her he was advocating for her advancement behind the scenes. His recommendation was buried. Cross continued. Master Chief Harlow ensured it never reached the appropriate channels. When I discovered what had happened, I designed this competition specifically to give you the opportunity that should have been yours 3 years ago. Kira processed the information slowly. Everything that had happened over the past week. The competition, the failures, the confrontation with Harlow. All of it had been orchestrated to bring her to this moment. What happens now? Now you have a choice. Cross reached into her pocket and produced a folder stamped with classification markings. There is a position opening at the training command. Advanced Sniper Instruction. You would be shaping the next generation of long-range specialists. Kira took the folder but did not open it. And if I decline, then you return to whatever assignment you choose, with my personal guarantee that no one will ever obstruct your career again. Cross smiled. But I think we both know you are not going to decline. The Admiral walked away, leaving Kira alone with the folder and the weight of a future she had never allowed herself to imagine. She found Harlow waiting near the command building. He stood in shadows, separate from the celebration that continued inside. When he saw her approaching, he straightened but did not speak. They faced each other in silence for a long moment. Two people who had been enemies for reasons that now seemed impossibly distant. I received a message from Admiral Cross. Harlow's voice was rough. She informed me of the mission outcome. Both shots confirmed. Kira nodded slowly. I also received notice that my request for retirement has been approved. He paused. Effective immediately. She studied his face, searching for bitterness or anger. What she found instead was exhaustion. The weariness of a man who had been fighting battles that could never be won. Your daughter. Kira spoke carefully. What was her name? Harlow's composure cracked. For a moment, she saw the grief he had been carrying for years, raw and unprocessed and terrible. Elizabeth. His voice broke on the syllables. She wanted to save lives. She believed she could make a difference. She did make a difference. Kira tipped closer. Every life she touched during her service mattered. Her death does not erase that. Harlow looked at her with eyes that glistened in the dim light. I spent years blaming everyone except the people who actually killed her. I convinced myself that keeping women out of combat would somehow honor her memory. He shook his head. I was wrong. About all of it. About you most of all. Kira reached into her pocket and produced the folder Cross had given her. I am being offered a position at Training Command, teaching the next generation. You should take it. Harlow's voice carried no hesitation. You are the best I have ever seen. The Navy needs people like you showing others what is possible. She extended her hand. He stared at it for a moment, then clasped it firmly. I am sorry. The words seemed to cost him everything he had left. For all of it. Kira held his grip. Apology accepted. She released his hand and walked toward the command building, leaving Vincent Harlow alone with his grief and the first steps toward a peace he had denied himself for far too long. 6 months later, the advanced sniper training facility at Coronado hummed with the controlled chaos of a new class arriving. 24 candidates stood at attention in the morning sun, their faces tight with the anxiety of people who understood they were about to be tested beyond anything they had experienced before. Kira walked the line slowly, studying each candidate with eyes that missed nothing. She wore her instructor credentials with the same quiet confidence she brought to everything. No wasted movement, no unnecessary words. Every gesture deliberate and precise. Webb stood at the far end of the formation, his role as assistant instructor suiting him better than either of them had expected. He caught Kira's eye and offered the smallest nod. She returned it without breaking stride. "Welcome to advanced long-range training." Kira's voice carried across the formation with authority that demanded attention. "Over the next 16 weeks, you will learn to shoot at distances that most of you currently believe are impossible. Some of you will succeed. Some of you will fail. All of you will be changed by what happens here." She paused at the center of the line, her gaze sweeping across faces that watched her with mixtures of curiosity and apprehension. "I am Chief Petty Officer Kira Okonkwo. I will be your primary instructor. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. The skills you will learn here are not about proving yourself. They are not about glory or recognition. They are about one thing only: saving lives." A hand rose near the end of the formation. Kira nodded permission to speak. "Chief, is it true you made a 4,000-meter shot during the Nevada trials?" Kira held the young sailor's gaze. "What is your name?" "Petty Officer 3rd Class Reeves, Chief. Diana Reeves." The name struck Kira like a bullet. She kept her expression neutral, but Webb saw the slight tension in her shoulders. Daniel had never mentioned having a sister. Or perhaps he had, and Kira had simply never asked. "Petty Officer Reeves." Kira's voice remained steady. "Yes, I made that shot, but the distance is not what mattered. What mattered was the 7 lives that depended on what came after." She resumed her walk along the formation, but her mind was spinning with questions she could not ask in front of the class. Daniel's sister. Here, training under her command. The universe had a peculiar sense of symmetry. The first week of training followed established protocols. Fundamentals, breathing, trigger control, the building blocks that every exceptional shooter had to master before attempting anything extraordinary. Kira pushed her students hard, but never beyond what she believed they could handle. Diana Reeves proved herself exceptional from the first day. Her natural ability was obvious to everyone who watched her shoot. But more than that, she possessed the same quiet intensity that Kira remembered seeing in Daniel. The same focus, the same refusal to accept limitations. On the 7th evening, Kira found Diana alone on the beach, staring at the sunset over the Pacific. "Your brother talked about this view." Kira settled onto the sand beside her. He said it was the only place where he could think clearly. Diana did not seem surprised by her presence. "He wrote about you in his letters. Before Kandahar, he said you were the best shooter he had ever worked with. He said you were going to change everything. He gave me too much credit." Diana turned to face her. "He also said you would say that." She paused. "I joined the Navy because of him. I requested sniper training because I wanted to understand the world he lived in. When I heard you were instructing here, I knew this was where I needed to be." Kira absorbed the weight of the moment. Daniel's legacy continuing through his sister. The same bloodline, the same potential, the same quiet determination. "Your brother saved my life more times than I can count." Kira's voice softened, not just in combat. "He believed in me when I did not believe in myself. He pushed me to see what I was capable of. I carry that with me every day." Diana nodded slowly. "I want to be worthy of his memory. I want to honor what he died protecting. Then stop trying to be worthy and start being yourself." Kira rose and extended her hand. "Daniel did not love you because of what you could accomplish. He loved you because of who you were. The shooting will come. The skill will develop. But you have to trust that you already have everything you need inside you. Diana took her hand and stood. Thank you, Chief. Kira smiled. The expression felt foreign on her face after so many years of careful neutrality. But it also felt right. Call me Kira when we are off duty. She walked back toward the barracks, leaving Diana with the sunset and the beginning of a journey that would shape both of their futures. The 16th week ended with a graduation ceremony that Admiral Cross attended personally. 20 of the original 24 candidates had completed the program. Each one received their advanced qualification with the understanding that they now carried responsibilities that few would ever comprehend. Marcus Chun was there, having completed his own training at a different facility. He stood proudly among the other observers, his instructor credentials still new on his uniform. Kira had recommended him as promised, and he had exceeded every expectation. Dr. Osei had flown in from Washington, her research now incorporating data from Kira's impossible shots. Their collaboration had produced 3 published papers that were changing how the Navy approached extreme long-range marksmanship. After the ceremony, Kira stood alone on the observation deck where her journey had truly begun. The same place where Vance had first discovered her notebook. The same place where she had hidden from a world that refused to see her potential. Webb found her there as the sun touched the horizon. Harlow sent a letter. He held up an envelope, wanted me to deliver it personally. Kira took the envelope and opened it slowly. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Chief Petty Officer Okonkwo. I have spent the past 6 months in therapy trying to understand the man I became after Elizabeth died. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I have started volunteering at a veteran center, working with other fathers who lost children in service. I am trying to turn my grief into something that helps rather than harms. You showed me that was possible. Thank you. Vincent Harlow. Kira folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket. She would respond eventually, not with absolution, but with acknowledgement. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. Webb leaned against the railing beside her. So what happens now? Kira watched the sun sink below the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Now I keep teaching, keep pushing, keep showing them what is possible when you refuse to accept impossible. She turned to face him, and for the first time in years, her eyes held something that looked like peace. Danny used to say that every shot I made was a life saved somewhere down the line. I never believed him. She paused. I think I am ready to start believing. Webb smiled. You have liked that. They stood together in comfortable silence as darkness settled over Coronado. Behind them, the next generation of shooters was preparing for journeys they could not yet imagine. Ahead of them, the future stretched with possibilities that Kira had finally learned to embrace. She was no longer the quiet woman who hid her gifts from the world. She was Chief Petty Officer Kira Okonkwo, instructor, mentor, legend, and she was just getting started. If this story moved you, drop a comment and let us know which moment stayed with you most, or share if you know someone whose quiet strength changed everything around them.